Welcome back. You're watching Inside Politics here on KTN News. Now, the war against coronavirus in the capital, Nairobi, might be running into serious political headwinds after Governor Mike Sonko threatened to pull out of his recent deed of transfer and saw several county functions, including healthcare, taken up by the national government. Sonko's remarks followed the demolition of several disinfection spray booths that he had set up in the city to combat the spread of COVID-19. Sonko claims there is a bigger scheme meant to humiliate him into quitting office. Is KTN's Moremi Mwangi with the tale of Sonko's troubles.
Monday the 20th of April, and Nairobi City Governor Mike Sonko launched these disinfection spray booths across the city in a bid to contain spread of the contagious coronavirus disease. A plan, he said, was aimed at donating 50 such equipment. Through his non-governmental organization, Sonko Rescue Team. 2 days later, residents of Kibra woke up to the spray booths missing, just as their counterparts in Muthurwa and commuters at the Kencom bus station. All the three reportedly having been demolished under the cover of darkness, allegedly under the supervision of Nairobi Regional Commissioner Wilson Jenga.
Kule Mombasa nimeona Governor Joho ametengeneza kitu inaitwa sanitizing booths. Na imeandikwa vizuri Hassan Joho Foundation. Hassan Joho and Shabal Foundation. Mbona hiyo haibomolewi? Kwa sababu iko na jina ya Hassan Joho. Why are we applying double standards?
If it is in the interest of the public that we sanitize, if it is in the interest of the public that we combat COVID-19, then the question we are asking, why do you, vandalize to extinction sanitization booths that have been erected by our leaders?
But speaking to KTN News, Njenga denied knowledge of removal of the booths. Njenga says he is only aware of his recent directive on channeling of all food and any other form of aid through the Emergency Fund Committee, after the Sonko Rescue Team attempted to distribute their aid directly to the people. But the governor now claims there is a bigger scheme to humiliate him among Nairobians, in what he says is meant to frustrate him out of office. A standoff, he says, has made it impossible to distribute these face masks, sanitizers and foodstuff to Nairobi residents. The governor, through his spokesperson, Ben Mulwa, has threatened to quit the deed of transfer that saw him hand over several county functions to the national government, including healthcare.
We find it a bit unfortunate there are a few individuals who think that they are immune either to this disease, or they think that by helping the public is they find that this is the time to play politics instead of teaming up with those who are doing something.
The said handover has already taken effect, with the budget for the transferred functions being budgeted with the parent national government ministries. Sonko threats and alleged plans of a petition already being drafted for filing in court, threatening to not only put in jeopardy the political tranquility necessary for the counter-COVID-19 war, but also the budget preparations for the coming financial year.
The governor is very expressed that in the event they are not able to follow through what is captured in the deed of transfer and what the constitution expects in the event functions are transferred to another government, the governor has no problem at all terminating this deed of transfer. And there is a very clear provision for the same.
And as the supremacy battle intensifies between the two levels of government, the casualty, it appears, might be the political unity necessary in the fight against the coronavirus. Moremi Mwangi, KTN News, in Nairobi.
Thank you, Moremi. I want us to separate this, what's happening politically in Nairobi with Mike Sonko and him threatening to pull out of that deal with the coronavirus pandemic. But let me begin with you, Bonawakili. What is happening to Sonko? Can he withdraw from that deal that transferred some key functions to the national government?
Ben, I think what is happening to Sonko has to be understood in the context on how the power takeover within Nairobi City County happened. There are several other things that it will seem the people who crafted the whole thing might have overlooked. One was to overlook the role of the County Executive Management Committee. When you read the Constitution of Kenya, the power and the overall mandate of running a county does not vest in governor as an individual. It vests in the County Executive Committee management as an organ of government and as the supreme organ of governing the county as it is. And I don't know the wisdom behind sidestepping the County Executive Management Committee and also going behind the back of the County Assembly and having this deed done. That is why we have the problems we have. And as to whether Sonko can frustrate this thing, yes, he can do, and he has. The ultimate power under Article 187 still lies with Mike Mbuvi Sonko because he has the executive authority as the elected leader of Nairobi County Assembly. What must be said is that when you read the Intergovernmental and Relations Act, the Act talks about a takeover being collaborative and not being hostile. What we are witnessing currently is an hostile takeover, and it brings to forth a few questions. The first question is this: what was the counter offer that Sonko took to State House so that they agreed as they were discussing? That's why the Constitution talks about the CECM as an organ of government, because Sonko could not, as by the law, have walked to State House and negotiated to give out functions without engaging the other organs of the county government. Secondly, the other question that ought to be asked: when you are giving functions, who ought to have gazetted the functions? It is not the national government, but the body that is donating its functions, which means by law, the body that ought to have gazetted the functions is the Nairobi County government. So that is the other question we need to ask. Why the rush? The third question is this: there is the issue of why was the public participation done after, as against what the Constitution says it should be pre, not post. And then the other issue also, Ben, I think as a final issue, the issue of aligning our laws to this takeover of power. When you read the Constitution, when you read the Public Finance Management Act, and when you also read the County Government Act, all those have given the power to manage the funds under the County Revenue Fund to the county governor. What happens in this case? This leaves Mbadi and his team in an awkward situation. And as to whether Sonko can frustrate or come out of this deal, yes, he can do that on the following fronts. One, he can do it from what the deed has said in mutual agreement of the two parties. Two, the other body which has capacity to frustrate or to get out of the deal is the County Assembly of Nairobi County. They can do that by citing illegality. If they can go to a point and establish that there were illegalities that were done, that can be done. And the other aspect also, the third aspect, I mean, is the issue of force majeure or frustration. This thing can be ended by force majeure, by an act of God. And the fourth one and the final one is if a court of law has sufficient ground to find that how this thing was conducted was not in a manner that brings forth the issue, because what must remain important is the service provision for the people of Nairobi.
Okay. Thanks, Kipchumba, for laying to us down the legal permutations. Now, having said that, and you ended on a very good note, that a lot of what's happening, the frustrations, the hostile takeover, if you can call it that, it's robbing the people of Nairobi proper service delivery. Does Sonko have the moral authority to frustrate these things which are denying people of Nairobi, his people who voted for him, services?
Well, he doesn't have moral authority, and he shouldn't even think of frustrating that deed. Because when you look at it critically, that move is illegal and unconstitutional. And when you speak to bright lawyers, including Kipchumba here, they'll tell you that this kind of transfer of functions from one government to another requires public participation before the act, the county assembly to pass a resolution before the act, and the county cabinet to pass a resolution before the act. Now, when you have a resolution of the county assembly and a resolution of the county cabinet, then armed with those two documents, Governor Sonko can go to State House and sign off those powers. But when you look at it critically, he went to State House, and it seems to me that he was under duress. Because you remember a few days earlier on, he was accused of issues of around corruption. He was arrested. He was found crying like a rat. So he was under duress. And again, when you go back to law, there are many vitiating circumstances that actually can be used to render this deed null and void. But that one cannot be done by Sonko, because I understand for you to pull out, it has to be mutual agreement by the two parties, and I doubt whether the national government will be happy to do that. Now, Sonko found himself in a tight corner. I understand he was given a call. He was told to come to State House in a suit. When he went there, he found everything is ready, and he was told, sign on the dotted line. And I suspect when he looked back, he saw President Kenyatta, and he said President Kenyatta controls the Jubilee MCAs at the county assembly. And his brother Raila Odinga controls the NASA MCAs at the county assembly. So he found himself in a tight corner, and he said, let me cede power. But again, when you go back to the beginning, Governor Sonko has been a disaster in Nairobi. So I think in as much as this thing may be illegal and constitutional, but it serves the public interest. Because now Nairobi is degenerating into some sort of a sewage, some sort of a garbage. Traders cannot even do business. I mean, you've got a business somewhere down River Road. When you open your business, there are hawkers. You know, things are really not functional. So maybe President Kenyatta was pushed into a corner, and they said, let me jump some landmines, but ensure that we get services. But moving forward, Nairobi residents then are well advised that in future, do not vote for people, because the party leader said that vote for him, I've got Paul Kapigadhe who is going to run the show. What happens when Paul Kapigadhe disappears? Now you're going to have a running battle between Governor Sonko, Speaker Elachi, and Badi. They're going to go to court. I'm not sure how soon the matters are going to be settled, because if you get a lawyer who's just come from the Kenya School of Law without much experience, they can easily go to the High Court and this deed will be overturned.
Okay, now we have on the line Governor Mike Sonko's spokesperson, Ben Mulwa. Thanks, Mr. Mulwa, for joining us. Now, a lot is happening here with the governor threatening to pull out of the deed of transfer of functions to the national government. And a lot of people are questioning why the governor is doing that. Yet he said he did not even read the deed, the contract that was signed.
Foremost, thank you, and it's a pleasure to join you in this discussion. I want to say jumbo to my friends Mark and Dismas and Hesbon, and I want to first clarify that indeed perhaps what the governor said may have been taken out of context, because as Dismas has pointed out very clearly, this particular deed of transfer may have been rushed, which may have given an opportunity for a lot of things not to be looked into in detail, given the fact that this is the first time there is a case whereby a county government is transferring functions to a national government. This is a provision in Article 187 of the Constitution, and it is important for people to pay attention specifically to the constitutional provisions. Contrary to what Dismas is insinuating, and I would like to appreciate what Kipchumba has just mentioned, it is clear that all contracts that anybody enters into, especially those that involve governments, are governed primarily by the supreme law, which is the Constitution. Anything else that may be contrary or may be in contravention of the Constitution does not stand. So in this particular case, there is no indication that the deed of transfer is supreme to the Constitution. And particularly, I wish to draw to the attention of Kenyans the provision of Article 187(2)(b), which expressly states that the responsibility of all the functions that have been transferred from one government to the other ultimately rests with the government that transferred those functions. This may come in importantly to answer the question that you had asked earlier, Ben, about the demolition of sanitization booth by the governor and why he was not at State House yesterday and all that. The one thing that people need to understand is ultimately the responsibility of these transferred functions will rest with the Nairobi City County government. In the event there will be audit queries or there will be concerns in terms of the performance of the functions that have been transferred, the blame will never go to the Nairobi Metropolitan Services or the Ministry of Devolution, because these are functions that are listed under Schedule 4 of the Constitution. Under the Constitution.
Thanks for that, Mr. Mulwa. What you're saying is that the Nairobi governor now regrets, making this deal. Is it fair to say that him and his people did not read the fine print of the contract?
I don't think it is an issue of the governor regretting. What the governor is becoming very concerned about is the fact that there are a few individuals who have infiltrated the process and who apparently are appearing to be frustrating the implementation of the deed of transfer. The ultimate signature or the ultimate signing of that particular deed was a culmination of a process that started way last year, where you remember the governor even appealed to the president in person to support him in his efforts to annihilate the cartels that have been chopping work at City Hall. So in this particular case, what the governor is bothered about is that, for example, if you look through the recent budget making process, the Assembly sat in its own volition and decided to allocate monies to the Nairobi Metropolitan Services under functions that have not been transferred to the NMS.
Okay.
So the governor is disturbed that it is only a month actually since this particular deed became effective, which was March 18th. So if this is going to be the way things are going to be done, then it is not essentially worth it.
Okay.
We would rather terminate this contract, and the Nairobi County government remains as it is constituted under the Constitution.
Can you?
And then, because ultimately is the one who will be answerable to the electorate.
Can you confirm? Can you confirm, sir, if indeed you are going to court for this?
Yes, the governor indicated that, and I want to believe once he's prepared on the same, he will be able to communicate that particular decision. But it is very strongly contemplating taking court action.
Final question. Final question. When this happened 2 months ago, the governor was in all sorts of political trouble with the county assembly, with even an impeachment motion being mooted. Do you think he can survive this?
Well, politics is very fluid, and a lot of things actually have happened ever since the signing of the deed of transfer. So our consideration, ultimately, he bears the greatest political responsibility, given the fact that he's the governor who was elected by the people of Nairobi. So our consideration is that ultimately he has the obligation to do the right thing.
Okay.
If pursuing the deed of transfer is what will be right, then we go with it. If terminating is actually what will ensure that the people of Nairobi continue benefiting from good governance, then we go for that.
Thank you, sir. Ben Muller, spokesperson to the Nairobi Governor. Mike Sonko joining us on the phone. Many thanks for your thoughts on that. Mark Bichachi, let me come to you. Why do you think the Nairobi Governor is thinking twice about the deal now?
Well, there's talk of that he's been talked to, and there's also talk to the fact that he's thinking of his political fortunes come 2022. It is very clear in his mind that without him being able to directly access the people, he's afraid that he may not be electable come 2022. But as usual, Ben, I would like to take this through the lens of what is good for the people of Nairobi. The truth of the matter is this, that the decision to take over the management of the county was a compromise decision to avoid taking the country and the nation through another by-election in Nairobi, because Sonko would definitely have been impeached. Number two, it was an effort to try and stabilize the country as it moved forward. Now, and they say hindsight is 2020. When I look back, we should have impeached the prison prefect and we should have elected a new government. And the reason I'm saying this is this. Sonko may be saying that the reason why he's complaining is because the boots were taken out. That is not true. The real fight is in the monies that were allocated to the management committee by the budget. That is where his fight is. If you look at his cases in court and you look at what he's been accused of and draw a line directly into the pending bills and the fights that he had with his chief officers, with the county committee member in charge of finance, then you know this is a money fight. Sonko signed this deed knowing that he would still control the money. The fact that he seems to be losing control of the money is what is driving him here. Trust you me, it is not about the boots, it's about the money, and it's about what he can access to do the same activities that he did that landed him allegedly in trouble with the courts of this land. So let's not lie to Kenyans that this is Sonko fighting for his opportunity to look very altruistic and caring for the people of Kenya. Not at all. This is about the bill that Elachi and the county assembly is discussing. That is what it's about. So he's throwing a tantrum to try and push his agenda through so that the finances of the county, which is the only thing he cares about, by the way, it's not about delivery, it's about the money. Look at his cases, and that's really what he cares about. And once there's a compromise there, you will see silence from his camp.
Hesbon Owila, what do you think about this Sonko issue?
Well, I think to a large extent, I want to agree with Mark Bichachi. You know, when functions were transferred to the Nairobi Management Services, it was a bit clear that resources were supposed to accompany these functions for, you know, the functions to be expedited by this setup. Now, if Sonko wants to have his cake and eat it, I think it's becoming problematic, not just for him, but for Nairobians, because the whole process was occasioned by the need to provide services for Nairobians. We had reached a point where Sonko was facing troubles in court. Sonko was facing trouble in the Nairobi County Assembly, and in a county that does not have a deputy governor, I think we're going to be thrown into a political limbo, which, if you couple with the COVID-19 situation right now, would still be struggling to come out of that and wouldn't even be having an end, you know, on site. So we cannot mix issues and right now say that, you know, the law was not followed. You know, the same Governor Mike Sonko has gone everywhere, on national media, on social media, saying that there were people who, there's a group of cartel that was against his development track record and his service delivery to the people of Nairobi. And the only way to have saved Nairobi was to sign this agreement with the national government. So he cannot go back and start claiming that he didn't read this deed. Yet at some point, he actually told Kenyans that he's the one who sought President Kenyatta's help and intervention in this. And if you look at this from the lenses of a public interest, Nairobians are not interested in theatrics. I think Nairobians are interested in service delivery. Now, if you look at it against the background of COVID-19, Nairobians are not interested in who is helping them in the fight against COVID. Nairobians are interested in a fight that will effectively help them contain the community transmission. So there is a committee that has been put in place to marshal all these things, to harness all the resources. And when you have individuals masquerading as philanthropists, you know, and putting up booths everywhere, you know, you ask yourself, do they have the framework and the mechanism to ensure that even as they do this, they prevent, you know, person-to-person transmission? And I think that is what this thing is all about, that it is not a question of someone coming out to show off that he's helping people. And you know, you cannot compare Nairobi and other counties that are far off, you know, from the national government seat of power. For the simple reason that in Nairobi there is a concerted effort by the ministry and other agencies. And therefore you cannot give the governor that overarching, you know, role in doing all these things about COVID. But ultimately, you may want to ask yourself, in all this, Sonko's background does not help him. You know, he has ridden on populism, and I think he's one of the most popular politicians that we have in Kenya after, you know, the top 3 politicians. And, you know, anything he wants to do, whether it is good or bad, it will be looked at within the spectacles of populism. And in this time of COVID-19, I think no one is interested in that. And then finally, I think for every agreement that is legal, there is always an exit clause. And I think if Sonko wants to pull out, there is a legal mechanism. But why is that going to be a lot more difficult? The transfer of power followed a process, you know, that was an agreement between the national government and the county government through Mike Mbuvi Sonko. And I think when they were doing that, they anchored it within the law, the provisions of the law that would have it expedited within the shortest time possible. So to say that they can use the same law to undo the things that they do, I think is going to be a lot more difficult.
Okay.
Given the overarching public interest that we have at the moment is to fight COVID and to have services delivered to Nairobians. So we should not even be thinking about the law or anything here. We should be thinking about when someone transferred power, he thought that he would still control resources. Now that he doesn't have control of those resources, is it possible then to disengage from this engagement because of resources? From where I see it, I don't think it is possible, and it is an exercise that is distracting us from the major thing that we are supposed to be focused on now, which is the fight against the spread of COVID-19.
All right, thank you, Hesbon. Very quickly, Kipchumba, you told us that legal permutations and that it is indeed possible for the governor to pull this and try to frustrate this, even get out of that deal. But politically speaking, does he have the political capital to do this, to even attempt it?
Ben, we went into the devolution chapter or the devolution part in this country because the guiding principle in devolution is that funds follow functions. And one thinks that when you take back or when you give back duties to the national government, the issue, the money that ought to go with those functions ought to go to the national government. But here there is another process here which ought to have been done. All the duties that were taken back to the national government ought to have been unbundled. Unbundling means that they ought to have been given costing so that you know if it is transport, this is the amount of the work being given there and this is the costing. And with the costing comes the issue of oversight. And that's why we are saying there is a step that we might need, the Senate might need to come and fill, the step of bringing forth a law that will talk about how power will be taken, how functions will be given back to the national government. But I need to bring to Hesbon's notice, within Hesbon's notice, that in terms of who has the ultimate power, when you read Article 187, the executive authority in a county government rests with the elected county governor. And it is for this reason that even if today you have given functions to Badi, but the budget that runs these functions has to be approved by Nairobi County, because the money collected by the Nairobi County and the money, the transfers that are done from the treasury to the county are done to an account in Central Bank known as the County Revenue Fund. And the person who has control over County Revenue Fund, even in Nairobi, is not Badi. It is Mike Mbuvi Sonko, through the person he has nominated. The signatures that are in Central Bank are two, that of Mike Mbuvi Sonko and that of his CEC, and the one for the County Officer Finance. So in terms of controlling money, you cannot take it away from Sonko because we have no legislation that says otherwise. The other aspect that we must also understand, and we must make sure that even as we try to give Nairobians the best interest of Nairobians at the front, we must make sure that the rule of law remains supreme. In this aspect, whatever Elachi and the people around the county assembly are doing, there is no known law that gives a speaker power to refuse to accept the memorandum from a county governor. We might be in a power, the takeover might have had its own problems, but at the end of the day, we must allow Sonko to operate as a governor. We have all reservations, I included, about his style of leadership. But when it comes to what the law has said and what the law has ordained, Sonko remains the executive governor of Nairobi.
All right.
And the other thing also that we might need to ask ourselves, as we discuss the issues of booths and everything, we must understand that whatever people are battling about Nairobi County is not who will deliver service to Mora and Wanjiko first. It is who will access the billions faster than the other, and which route is more easier. Even the people who are not happy about Sonko are not happy about the leadership style of Sonko. They are not happy because maybe Sonko has made it hard for them to access the billions. That is the main thing we are battling about, Ben. If it was service delivery, finally, it would have been, we will be battling. If it were purely on an issue of service delivery, you need to ask yourself, when you read the Intergovernmental Act, how these things ought to have been transferred. The ministry, if you say we are transferring transport, it ought to have been transferred to the Ministry of Transport. If you are transferring finances, they ought to have been transferred to the relevant ministry, not the way we have seen it.
Okay, all right. It is a situation matter. Sorry, we are keeping an eye on the county of Nairobi. Julius Basweti tweets and says, Sonko portrayed a lot of ignorance, inept incompetence and carelessness by claiming that he signed a legal document he never knew its contents. Sonko fixed and boxed himself politically. He's a caged bird. Stay at home, says on Twitter. Sonko is playing monkey tricks. This is the person who told Nairobians that this was the best deal with the national government that served the interests of the people as he dealt with these court cases, and that enough participation, public participation, had been done. And Ivali Jr. tweets and says, Sonko signed the deal under duress. It's high time he reverses the whole deal. It does not, it's not in the interest of Nairobians. Keep the tweets coming. Keep the conversation going online. Our hashtag is Inside Politics. Let's take another quick commercial break here. We're back for a final part of the show where we will be getting your feedback, interacting with you. And today we don't want you to call in. We want to have you on Zoom. We shall be displaying the Zoom ID and password at the bottom end of your screen shortly. So if you can, join us via technology, Zoom us and tell us what you think about what we're discussing today. The extension of the curfew, the daily dusk to dawn curfew, as well as the extension of the cessation of movement in and around the epicenter counties, as well as who do you think has stood out in this COVID-19 global pandemic? Which counties, which leaders have risen to the occasion? Also, what is your take on what's happening in the county of Nairobi? Don't go too far. This is Inside Politics.